Well, good evening, everyone. Welcome to Next Level by Association. And as we're getting people into the room and as we are broadcasting now live on Facebook, just so you guys know, it is being broadcast live on Facebook in our public group. So, and then it'll be removed and taken straight to our membership site, and it'll be remain there. So I'm glad you guys are here. I'm glad you guys are watching either live or recorded. As always, this is something that we've done for the last 13 years. First 10 years, we're all in person over dinner. And then obviously, you know what happened. So we ended up having to close, the restaurants were closed. So we ended up having to do it virtual. So we've remained doing it virtual as well. So we're excited to have you guys, excited to see you guys participating in life. A lot of people are just waiting for life to happen. Normally, the people in this group are people that are making things happen. So I appreciate that about you guys. And so let me just start with a couple of things. One, you guys all know Flo. Flo is my girlfriend. She has a company called Farm Girl Edibles and does some amazing things with jellies and jams and Crackle, which is a amazing product. Flo, you've been a member for 6 years now when we met, right?
Yes.
What has been the biggest takeaways for you in this last 30 days? I mean, every 30 days we kind of get an update. What's been going on with you in the last 30 days?
With me personally, um, my business has really been taking off with one product, one product. So, I'm going through the motions of considering what do I do with just that one product when all the other ones, do I do I just kind of table those or just start running with that one product? So
Okay. So
that's
what's been your accomplishment this last 30 days? You're in new
um
stores, right?
I'm in stores and I just signed another one on today. So
Awesome.
um
Awesome.
kind of
Congrats. Awesome. Jim Miller. Hey, brother. Jim has been a member for a few months now, and he's very active doing a lot of things. He's a leadership expert, but he's really active doing a lot of fun things. So, Jim, tell us about what in the last 30 days has transpired for you.
Hey Bob, how you doing, brother? Wow, I just started thinking about it. It's a lot. I've started two live broadcasts. I was doing them recorded. Now I'm doing them live, which is a whole new thing, but it's so much fun. And I've started a generational wealth program, and I'm opening up a cash flow banking system for myself, so I can draw money, basically become my own bank, and use that money for investing and growing savings. And then and also create trusts for my family to create generational wealth. So that's in process. And then started working on a book. I've got a deal going with a group to participate in like a compendium, I guess, or anthology to publish. And then gosh, I've been doing all kinds of events. I was in Texas with Ken and Glenn last month. That was amazing, and being involved with Next Level. I mean, I'm going to several of your uh, shows, I guess, or your coaching and your just everything's building and building and building. So yeah, there's a lot going on. Thank you.
That's awesome, man. Congratulations. Way to go.
Thanks.
Way to take action. Dan Altmeyer, how are you doing, brother? Give us
I'm
an
well,
update on
thank
how
you.
this last 30 days happened for you.
Well, one highlight was I got interviewed by Jim Miller.
Nice.
That was a highlight for me, Dan. That was fun. I still have to publish that though, because I think we did that old school.
Yeah, that was recorded.
Yep, I'm a little behind on those. We'll get
you were
them.
afraid to put me out in public. That's I guess, but it was fun. It was a lot of fun, and building my business. I do long-term care, uh, dementia care planning, and that is building and doing well. We have a book coming out this quarter on planning for dementia and extended care. So I'm looking forward to releasing that by the end of March, which is a lot quicker than I thought it would be.
That's awesome. Congratulations.
Thank you.
Guys, I see some people online in the Facebook group too. At the end, we're going to open it up for live Q&A, but I want to introduce you to a gentleman that, it's interesting because how we met was through one of the other guest of honors that was a guest of honor, Justin Breen. And then Justin introduced me to Matt, and Matt and I had a real good conversation. We really, it was a 15-minute get to know you. It ended up going probably close to an hour, if I remember correctly. We had a really good conversation. I think, when somebody makes a referral to me, all I have to do is think who's making the referral. And then it's an easy yes or an easy no. If I really trust them and like them, it's an, absolutely yes. And Justin was one of those guys that said, absolutely yes. Didn't know why, didn't know what he wanted us to meet. So I said, what do you think he wanted us to meet about, Matt? And so Matt shared something that we have in common. So we're gonna talk about that. But I think one of the biggest things right now is, Matt, welcome to the show. Thanks for being on with us. And this will be in the private Facebook group. We'll make you a member of as soon as it's over. So you'll have access to watch and participate and answer questions and talk to people afterwards too. But Matt, not everything. You've got a very successful business. You're doing some great things, but it didn't come without a hitch. It didn't come without challenges along the way. And the one that we have in common is this kind of brings us to be members of a club that no one wants to belong to. Can you kind of talk about that and what transpired there?
Yeah. Well, first of all, thank you, Bob. I'm grateful to be here, and for everybody that's joining on, I hope this can be an encouraging and an inspiring conversation that we're going to have together. The club that Bob's referring to is we've both lost children, and it's one of those things, like, I think it's a grace. Like, if God showed us what our future would look like, we would probably change some things, and the interesting thing about the paths that it takes for us to grow and eventually reach destinations that I think we all want to arrive at, it requires valleys, and it requires times of trial and difficulty. And so, you can't have one without the other. You can't have light without darkness. You can't have, six-pack abs without extreme discipline in the gym and, good eating habits and sacrifice. And you can't find success in anything in life without a certain measure of struggle. And so because of that, I like you, and I'm sure like most people in this room, focus on maintaining a sense of gratitude, that no matter what comes, I believe that it can be a setup for success rather than a setback for failure. And so, yeah, back in 2000, and I'm originally from Canada, and stop me, feel free to flag me down, Matt, let's go this way anytime. I'm originally from
story, so
yeah. Well, thank you. I'm originally from Canada, and I live here in Texas. I moved here in 2016. And, it's interesting, like, I'm in marketing now, and I run a marketing company, but I didn't go to school for marketing. I didn't foresee myself becoming a marketer. But it's funny that while I'm here now, I look back and I see moments when it starts to make sense and the puzzle pieces start to become a little clearer. And well, I'll tell you this one real quick. When I was 9 years old, back in the day when clip art was cool, and you guys will remember that time, everybody's talking about AI, but back then it was all about clip art. Let me tell you something.
Right.
And I remember my dad, had his first cell phone, and we played Snake on that thing, and he gave me his laptop computer, and I was playing around with clip art, and even when I was like 12, 11 years old, was designing, you know, brands and marketing material, and was just being me and having fun. And for the most part, that's what I get to do today. But you know, reflecting back in 2008 was just when I was married in 2007 for the first time, and then had my firstborn in 2008. And actually, if I'm able to share screen, I'll show you guys a couple pictures, which might make this a little more of a tearjerker than the story is already gonna be.
Is it letting you
But
share?
let me try now. Oh, it still won't let me.
It won't? Okay, let me
No.
see if I can change that.
Mm.
Go ahead and keep talking and I'll
Yeah. Well, I'm drinking some tea, by the way.
okay, good. Me too.
Yes.
Spotlight to everyone.
Mhm.
Oh,
But in yeah, while you're getting that, I'll keep checking. But yeah, so I'm married for the first time 2007, had my firstborn 2008. And how special is that when you have your first and they make you a, you know, a dad or a mom?
yeah.
That's an incredibly special feeling. And so this is my firstborn right here. And you know, she's my little angel. This was back in this was February 18th, 2012. And this was 2 days before she passed away. And we were hanging out watching a basketball game together, and some family members and stuff. And I love these you know, photos from a photo shoot that we did.
Cool.
But 2008 was, you know, it was a special year. And I had always known since I was young that I wanted to be in full-time ministry, and I really enjoyed travel a lot. And when I started to travel and experience other cultures and stuff, I thought, man, I'd love to do this full time. And again, like it's interesting, like decisions that we make, especially when we're young and naive, you know, like at that time I was very young and very idealistic and just ambitious. And I thought I was going to, you know, go out there and change the world, and, you know, had visions of grandeur and all these big dreams. And I didn't know at what cost it would come. But my prayer when I was a teenager, I'll never forget it, is I would always pray that God would do exceeding abundantly above all that I ask or even think. Like I wanted him to use me greatly. And as you've probably heard many times, in order for that to happen, he has to wound you deeply. And
Say that one again.
yeah, in order for God to use you greatly, he needs to wound you deeply.
Whew.
And as a fellow at the time missionary friend of mine whose parents, which is another story, you should probably have him on to speak, but his mom escaped the Khmer Rouge in Cambodia, and he arrived in the US, landed in LA, was shot 3 times, just growing up in very difficult environments and neighborhoods. And he said, Matt, I'll never forget this. He told me after when Aslan passed, he said, Matt, don't waste your wounds. And so I have little things like that along the way that have given me perspective on really the importance and value that comes with gut-wrenching, very difficult experiences that have, you know, the harder the experience or the challenge, like the greater the opportunity there is to make an incredible difference. And I'm grateful that, I'm not going to take credit, but God put that in me from a young age, to make that my mentality and my focus. Like I can't control what's going on around me, but I can absolutely control how I respond. And I'm a highly competitive person. If you're competitive, you know, that can be good and bad, but I'm a highly competitive person. So I took it as a personal challenge. Anytime something difficult or hard would come my way, I'm like, you know, I'd speak to the devil, like, I'm not going to let you win this. I'm going to win this, and I'm going to let God get the glory. And so no matter what he threw my way, I just purposed that I'm going to throw it right back in his face, and, you know, sing and dance in the rain. So I'll get back to the story here, but in 2008, so Aslan was born. 2010, at the time I was interning at a church and was getting ready. I was getting antsy. I wanted to just jump into ministry and launch out and do this thing. I was selling cars. Yes, they were used cars, but I was not that used car salesman. And I gave it up, and I just, you know, here's my hat. Thank you very much. Like, I appreciate everything. And Mike Crosby's still up there in Ontario and doing a great job at the car dealership I was working at. But 2010, was when I quit everything and I put all my chips into the middle of the table, and just packed up my suitcases and started hitting the road. And I had hustled for months and months and months to fill my calendar with meetings, enough meetings, because as my mom would say, Matt, how are you going to eat and how are you going to pay the bills and how are you guys going to survive? You know, like every good mother's supposed to do.
Right, right.
And meanwhile, you know, when I'm young, I'm like, Mom, stop it. I'll be fine. Okay. Like I got this. And so I packed out my calendar for about a year and just hit the road. Maddie was then born September 27, 2010. She's my redhead, and she's now 13. And from that moment, 2011, 2012, literally just like traveled. You know, I living out of suitcases, driving our van from conference to conference and church to church and event, just, you know, presenting my vision for our ministry, which was to help Cubans and Dominicans, and essentially do that from basing out of the Dominican, because my heart broke for the persecuted and unreached people groups in the world, which, you know, Cubans kind of fall into that category. They're unbelievable people, but they have a, you know, decades long battle with religious freedom and against the government there. So my heart went out to them, and I was a Canadian, so it was easy for me to get in. Represent. I'm wearing my Canadian sweater tonight, by the way.
Nice, nice.
So yeah, so everything was going great. And we were very excited. We were getting a lot of traction, and you know, churches were picking us up very quickly. And then comes the detour. February 20th, 2012. We had Maddie and Lucy. We had Aslan and Maddie. Lucy's my 10-year-old. We had her in 2013. And so we had Aslan and Maddie, and Aslan was 3.5, about 3.5 at the time. Maddie was 18 months. And I'll never forget it. It was an incredibly special time, because that weekend prior to the accident, which was in North Carolina, God just allowed us to spend a couple days in a home, which for us was very rare, that we actually were not in a hotel or, you know, a property that didn't make it feel like we were in a home. So we were in a home and just made some special memories with the kids. And then early that morning, I remember that night, Sunday, we had watched a movie. I think it's Fireproof, one of the movies where the daughter does die in the movie. And I remember having the conversation with my wife at the time, like, what would we do if that was us? And I don't know what, you know, maybe it was a sign the Holy Spirit was trying to do something, but you know, I remember determining, like, oh, well, I mean, you know, it'd be tragic, hope it never happens, but you know, it wouldn't cause me to quit. And you know, lo and behold, the next morning we jumped in the car early. There was some snowfall. This was in North Carolina. We were traveling to Ohio, and driving along the road, heading north on the highway. And the more we drove, we would see, you know, cars in car in a ditch here, one spun out there. And to, you know, put in perspective, I'm from Canada. Driving in the snow is what we do. Like, we don't get scared when it snows. Yeah, exactly. Like, no big deal. But what I was not aware of was the infrastructure, you know, for how they keep the roads clean is obviously very different in North Carolina compared to Ontario, where they have snow and, you know, snow trucks, and they're salting the roads like all the time. And so we were driving north, and we were about to come over a bridge, and when we drove over that bridge, our van hit black ice and then spun out of control, and everybody in the van was asleep, thankfully. I did wake up. Naturally, my wife at the time, she, you know, kind of woke up and we started spinning out of control, and you know, it was a tough moment, and it was one of those moments that was just, you know, felt like a movie. Like, I can't believe this is happening. And I thought we would just, you know, come to a sliding stop. North and South Highway had a very large median, or open pasture, if you will, of grass in between. And so I thought, you know, and I wasn't driving that fast. I mean, it was a little bit under the speed limit, you know, which I drive fast, but at that moment I wasn't. And so we slid off the road, and unfortunately came to a shattering halt when our van struck an interstate pole. One of those big signs, you know, for like an exit. We struck the pole, and it landed, we landed right on Aslan's door, which was rear passenger side. And glass shattered, airbags went off. I got punched in the face, and I'd usually, when I'm driving long distances, I drive without my shoes on, and so I had, my shoes off, and windows were shattered, and I remember, just kind of, being disoriented and trying to, get a sense of what just happened, and I remember turning around and looking at Aslan and seeing that she was just kind of slouched over and hunched in her high chair. And so my phone got tossed. I couldn't find my phone. I knew I needed to call 911, and I jumped out of my window, and barefoot, crunching both snow, ice, and glass, and ran around to her door. And I'll never forget so many moments from that day, but standing there and just looking at the wreck. And my first reaction was, I shouted and screamed and I said, God, please don't take my child. That was the first thing I said over and over and over again. And then the second, thing that came to mind was, what do I do? Do I pick her up? Do I not? What are the injuries? Am I going to make it worse? Is this are these my final moments? Like, I didn't really know necessarily what to do. And then my third realization was, I need to get somebody to stop and come and help us. And that's when the miracles started to happen. I remember scooping her up, and her body kind of did like a heave, and I thought she was breathing. But later on, as I would find out, her body was letting out all of its air. And so that was those were her last breaths. And as I like to say, she left her earthly father's arms and went straight into her heavenly father's arms. And that was my last moments with her alive until next time. And so the miracles, there was an ambulance that happened to be driving by right at the moment of the accident, and it saw us and pulled over, came over to the van, and come to find out, they were people of faith from a church called Amazing Grace Baptist Church. Could there be any more perfect name? Because we needed some amazing grace. And they said, well, it's a good thing. I mean, it's not a good thing, but we're grateful that your accident took place here, because if it had taken place further up the road, it would have been out of our jurisdiction, and we would have had to have called in somebody else. And I don't know all the nuances of their profession, but I'll take that as a sign.
Amen.
And so they jumped in, called additional support. They had to cut my first wife's door off with the jaws of life. She sustained some pretty bad injuries. And I'll tell you, one of the hardest moments for me was looking at Maddie's eyes, because she was 18 months, and it's amazing. She had barely a scratch. She was totally fine. But children do this, right? They look at us and they gauge how we're feeling, what we're thinking based off of our emotions and our facial reactions. And I had to maintain a sense of calm for her, not to frighten her, but to give her a sense of peace, and everything's going to be okay. And that was really hard. But so she and I were loaded in the same
Enough
ambulance.
to even sense that. Congrats, man.
But yeah, I
just
just
to know that is amazing. Yeah.
Mhm. Yeah. So we jumped in the same ambulance, and Lana was taken to Winston-Salem Baptist Hospital in Winston-Salem. We were in Mount Airy at the time, so we went to the hospital nearby there. And over and over and over again, Bob, they had our staff in both hospitals were from that church. A worker in her ambulance was from that church.
Wow.
And it was just like a covering was just all over us. And so that brought me a sense of peace. I remember I was laying in the stretcher in the ambulance, and with one hand, my left hand, I'd found my phone, and I sent out a tweet. I said, we were in an accident just now, not sure if Aslan's going to make it. Please pray. #retweet. And that one like kind of set off this tidal wave of people and churches just praying and texting us, and then the donations started to roll in, and, you know, visits. And when we got to the hospital, they were wanting to do a news piece here and interview me for this. And it was just wild what the community, how the community responded, and really what God was trying to do, you know, to shine a light and give us a spotlight. And I was very sensitive to, you know, like, to that moment. I knew this was a moment. I'll never get that moment back. And how I respond in this moment, what I say, and the message that I try to communicate is very important in that moment. And I wanted it to be a moment where I express gratitude for local people, but then also just tried to encourage and inspire people to carry on. So when I went in my hospital, there was a pastor that came by my bed, my stretcher. This was before I went over to Aslan's room. She was next door and actually got confirmation that she had passed. So in that moment, I'm looking at him. I'm like, what am I supposed to do? I gave up everything for this dream. I left my home. I packed up everything. I've been living out of suitcases for almost 3 years. And I mean, we lived it was a tough life. There were some goods and bads, but it was not easy.
Right.
And I said, how am I supposed to react to this? Like, what do I do? And I'll never forget the words that he said. He said, Matt, you have a choice. Either the words that you said from the platform were just words, or they were words that you actually meant. And you can choose now to live out what you've preached. And that really struck a chord. And I didn't want to, I certainly didn't want to, you know, to not live up to what I had been telling everybody else to do and believe.
Right.
But I also wanted, you know, as Malachi said, I wanted to put God to the test. Like, I know one of two things. You know, Thomas goes to, you know, I think it was to Jesus, and he's like, well, you also go away. And he's like, you know, to whom shall we go? You alone. Or is it Peter? You know, to whom shall we go? You alone have the words of life. And I'm like, I know if, you know, if I walk away from the faith, or I get bitter and I just leave, and I just, you know, get frustrated and mad, and I head down this path, like, I know where that's going to lead. It's not going to lead anywhere good. And so I'd rather skip over all of that, and let me just find out where this is headed and why. And that's the question we all want to know, right? We want to know why. Why did you allow this to happen, God? What's the purpose? Like, what's the bigger picture? And as I say many times, sometimes it's not a question of, you know, if God is going to do something, it's when. And our biggest sticking point typically is the timeline. We get frustrated with the timeline. We live in an instant society, and I want it now. I want my answers now. Like, I want to get through this painful season now. I want to understand, you know, what's going on. Like, what's the motive? We want to understand and see everything now, but that's just not the way it works. Like, God doesn't allow us to do that, because if He gave us the answers right away, we wouldn't be able to develop the muscles that would make, you know, that would morph us into who we need to be. And we would miss so much in the journey along the way, that, you know, heck, you wouldn't enjoy Everest as much as you would if you just like pushed a button and boom, you're on top.
No,
It's
true.
it's the months and years of training, and I've never climbed Mount Everest, but it's the months and years of training that go into you actually being able to start and finish that journey. And then all the levels you reach along the way, where you can stop and look down and enjoy the view and know that you didn't get here because somebody made it easy. You got here because you were willing to put in the work, and you had enough faith to endure and stick it out, even when it was hard and people are dropping off left and right. And you're there standing, and you're not standing alone. You're standing with God, because He's there with you every step of the way. And so I wanted to find this out. Like, God, this thing better be good, because
You know,
this is a
Matt,
big sacrifice.
what comes to mind when you're talking about that is, you know, Romans 8:28 says, we know that all things work together for the good to them that love God and are called according to His purpose.
Mhm.
We know that all things work together to the good. Does not indicate that we know how they're going to work together for the good.
Yes.
When you said, but you know that it's going to work together, but in the meantime, you're still trying to figure out how's this going to work? How's this all going to come back together again when my daughter just passed away?
Yes.
What was the resolve that you found to be able to do that in that moment versus hindsight's 2020, 5 years from now, 5 years from then, whatever. But in that moment, how did you
Yeah.
find that resolve?
Yeah. I had a deep rooted conviction that if God is who he says he is and his word is true, then I can trust him.
Hmm.
And I believed that God is good, his word is true, and he can be trusted. Then the only thing I needed to worry about was the timeline. And so,
Wow.
yeah, that's
Good for you. Good for you. You were definitely a testament to your faith in that moment. And I love what you said, that you could either, obviously what that pastor said was really a great approach for you to go.
Yeah.
I either was making fun of what God said, or I was going to live it. And
That's it.
man, I tell you, that's
Yep.
it's a tough one. I
Yeah.
applaud you for having it in that moment. In
Yeah.
that moment, I did too, but
Yeah.
quickly it dissipated. Like, okay, now why?
Yeah.
Did you ever come to the recollection, or did you ever come to the understanding of why that happened?
Yeah, good segue. Let me tell you a story. There was a very special moment where this was the aha moment that brought it full circle for me. And I believe there are many answers to that question.
Yeah.
Some more important and more pronounced and obvious than others,
Hmm.
and more special. This was one that brought me so much fulfillment. Um, this was my biggest moment right here, where I realized I think this is why. So the picture that I'm showing you here is of me in India at an orphanage. And one of the relationships that I met through the accident, because it happened in North Carolina, the churches of North Carolina wrapped their arms around us, and I was able to make a lot of friends in North Carolina, who are still special to this day, and they will be for the rest of my life. One of them was Liberty Baptist Church in Durham, North Carolina, and the Coxes were the family that were pastoring that church. And Josh and I became very close at that time. That was the pastor's son. We were the same age. He had two girls, and I had two. And his dad had a ministry in India for 35 years. And so as I got to know him and he got to know me, he said, "Hey, why don't you come to India? I'd love to show you what we got." And me, kind of growing up, the adventurous type, and watching a lot of Indiana Jones movies, I said, "Sure, I'd love to go." And so I went on this wild adventure over to India to see what he had been doing for the past few decades. And it was amazing. India radically changed my life. 1 billion people in that country, 35 million orphans in the country, um, all the highs and lows of, high society, low society, poverty like you've never seen. But what I found there was, first of all, I mean, the people that I met, especially the Christians and church leaders, I felt like a nobody. Like the sacrifices that I made in comparison to what they were facing on a regular basis were not even close to being compared. Death to them was a regular thing. And honestly, this trip brought a lot of healing because now in my life, I've had words throughout seasons, and the word for me in this season was perspective. I prayed that God would give me perspective on my situation, and this trip gave me perspective. I don't really have it all that bad compared to a lot of other people in the world. And so when I went on this trip, the one guy who was our handler and our coordinator and our runner boy, and he helped us get to and from and book hotels and get to meetings and stuff. His name was Danny. And Danny, all week, he had been anxious to take me to a property that he wanted to show me, a project. And at the end of the week, we had a little bit of time, and he asked me one more time, and I said sure. So I jumped on his scooter. We drove about 2-3 miles from where we were holding meetings, and we came to this building. And he told me the story. He said, "My wife and I feel called and burdened to help orphans, and my wife took out a bank loan to build this orphanage, and it wasn't complete. It was just being started. Walls were going up." And he said, "Would you pray that God would bless this building and that God would use it?" And I said, "Man, that'd be great. I'd be honored." And so I prayed, blessed it. He became friends with me. and speed up, the timeline a few months. And he messaged me on Messenger, and he said, "Brother," and I was just kind of helping him and just doing what I can to support him. And he said, "Brother, I want to ask you a very special question. Would you allow me to name this orphanage after your daughter?" And
Wow.
and I said, like, yes, I would love to do that with you. And it was kind of a bucket list item. I had hoped someday I'd be able to help orphans and start an orphanage. I had no idea that it would happen that fast. This was in the same year. This was later that year. And now the picture you're seeing, this is in 2015. This is December 2015. This was days before my birthday. And that's important because Aslan was born 7 days after my birthday. And the picture here is just around the time of my birthday. This was the last trip I've made to India. And the girl that you're seeing me give a hug to, and right there, her name is Mary Shanti. And as we call her Shanti, she has a younger sister called Mary Krupa. So Shanti and Krupa, they're both girls, and they were born with HIV because of it's passed through her mom. And they were at the time maybe at the time when we first met them, we met them back in 2013. They were maybe 5 and 3, and they were orphans, and like someone from the village took them to 20 different orphanages and children's homes, and they all turned them down. And because they in that society at the time, and I'm sure in some rural places in India it's still the same, but the caste system says that they're worthless. And when they have a physical ailment like that, then they're even more worthless. And so this picture, I think moments after this picture was taken, I remember sitting down with Danny. And well, first back in 2013, when we found out about the girls, Danny called me and he said, "What do you want to do? We can't take them in because legally in India, you have to have separate dorms for girls and boys." And I said, we brainstormed ideas, and I said, "Well, can we just rent a house?" And he said, "Yeah." So we just went and rented a house, and we very quickly started taking in lots of girls in the home. And so 2015 here, when I went out and spent time with her and visited with her, I remember Danny and Shanti was there, and Andrew Smith, my friend who now runs the orphanage. We were there hearing Shanti tell her story through Danny, an interpreter. And it was heartbreaking. She had never been told that she was beautiful. She was never told, she was told, "You're worthless. You'll never amount to anything." Like all the most heartbreaking things that you can imagine a child would hear and have to endure. And here's these poor children. We had to shave their heads because HIV caused their like boils and skin, welts, and it would crack and bleed. And it was really bad. And so this trip, you see, she's wearing earrings. We took the girls shopping. First time ever they went shopping. We gave them ice cream for the first time. And I've got these beautiful pictures of them smiling and just experiencing the joys that every child should be entitled to, that they should be able to experience in their childhood. And we gave it to them. And so this trip was unbelievably special. To bring it full circle, in the moment when it was the aha moment, was when we were leaving, and I gave her my card, like my prayer card, and on it was like a picture of my face and my number. And she didn't speak really good English, and so she's like, they're running after the van as we're driving away, and she's like, "Brother, brother," and they stop, and she comes up and she's like, "I'll call you, I'll call you," and I'm like, "Okay, great, yeah, call me." And so the trip home, we routed through JFK. And I remember coming into JFK, Danny had said, "Hey, when you get a moment, I want to call you because I have a question that Shanti has a question for you." And so when I got to JFK, I remember exactly where I was standing when this happened. I can see it in my mind's eye. I'm in a part of the airport where the glass doors open and close, and people come in and out of the airport in a terminal. And I stood there, and I took my tablet and I jumped on FaceTime with him on a video call. And Shanti says to him, and he tells me, he says, "Matt, she wants to know if she can call you daddy." And that was the moment where I realized all of those events that I had to go through to be where I was standing and to connect with people like her, all the people that had to come together to make that moment happen. I couldn't have orchestrated that. That was God.
Right.
Like God put the whole thing together. And, you know, if I could trade one for now, since then, it's 2024. That was 2012 when we started it. You know, we're going on 12 years. We've helped hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of kids. If I could trade one for 500,
Mm, mm.
I'd take that. You know, if I were to go back and if God gave me the choice, I mean, I don't know that we would all, you know, if we were honest, if we'd willingly give up one of our own, if that were the way that you could reach, you know, 400, 500, maybe 1,000, who knows, like on throughout my life, how many that number will grow to. But I don't know that we'd make that call, because that's a hard sacrifice.
Yeah.
But I'm grateful that God he didn't in his sovereignty, and I trusted him. I'm grateful he didn't give me the option, because I couldn't imagine my life without being able to tell this story, knowing that I was able to help these kids.
Yeah, but man, the story you're able to tell, um, I think means even more because of the price you had to pay.
Yeah,
For me, I know that's true, and I'm guessing for you. You know, I think that when we suffer a loss like that, I'm with you, man. If somebody said, okay, you can save, you know, you could have a message that'll reach 1,000 people, or you can
yeah,
and or you can save your daughter. I'm glad that's not in my hands.
yeah, me too.
I'm glad it wasn't in my hands, because I'm sorry, the selfish part of me would say, I'll save my daughter. The
Hmm.
1,000, I'm sorry, but you know,
Yep,
yeah,
that's
what a
correct.
great perspective. I love the word perspective on this situation.
Yeah,
You know, when you look back now and you go, do you feel like you're able to connect with people differently today than you were then?
for sure,
Yeah, I do too. And
for
it's
sure.
amazing. I go, I know that when somebody's complaining about something, or somebody's, you know, all upset, I'm going, serious?
Yeah,
That's what you're upset about?
yeah,
I can connect with them. I have empathy, but it's a
yes,
connection that is different than if I had not gone through that. I would never be able to connect with certain people.
agreed. Yes,
Wow.
agreed. Yeah, you live life differently. I've ever since then I've lived life very differently.
Can you
And
kind of explain that? How do you live life differently?
yeah, well, you know, I wish there
Hold on, I'm
was.
going to cut off the feed um, to Facebook,
Yeah,
because this is for members only. So we're going to do this. Stop the live stream, and we're now off of Facebook. So this is all private, and will be
yeah,
in the group.
great. Yeah, I'll tell you one thing. One way it's caused me to live life differently is I have a much longer view of life now than I did before.
Mm,
And whereas you know, when you're young and in your 20s, like you don't think, you know, 5, 10, 15, 20 years down the road. Um, so I developed some muscles that have allowed me to, you know, I'm like the Ethiopian marathon runners, where I can endure some things. And this wasn't, you know, this was probably the most difficult valley I had to go through, but I've had some since. I've
sure.
had valleys since. Um, I didn't foresee in in the wake of this accident, that I would, you know, it would eventually lead to the dissolution of my marriage. I didn't see that. Um, I didn't see that I would become, you know, a full-time single dad now, raising my girls alone. I didn't foresee that. I didn't foresee that it would lead to me losing my ministry, because churches that I came from don't support divorced guys or gals. I didn't see that. I didn't see, you know, the loss in friends or maybe respect that I once had.
Right.
I didn't see having to, you know, then just to pay the bills and survive, have to clean pools and take any kind of odd job that I could in a new city like Dallas, where I just moved to. Like, I didn't see all of those things,
So
but
how did you handle that? Because I, I I hear it in your voice. I know the feelings of it. Um, to have an expectation that your brothers and your sisters, your church, your community were going to support you and be there,
Yeah.
and then you find they're not there. So how did you deal with that disappointment?
That's really hard. That was very hard because, first of all, like missionaries in the Baptist world that I came from are celebrated and honored. And we would go around from church to church and they would make us feel very special. And it's this weird dynamic of like loneliness when you're out there, on the field, if you will. And then when you come back home, it's like, yeah, you guys are amazing. And so it's this weird, dynamic of like highs and lows. But um, there were some, what I learned was there are some friends that will stick with you no matter what. And when you go through difficult times, it's refining. It's a refining and it's a filtering process for you to identify who was really with you all along. And I wouldn't expect 1,000, all these people to really consistently rally around me. And I'm grateful for the ones that have. Honestly, I still feel a great sense of gratitude in the people that every February 20th, they message me and they say, hey, I'll never forget. It pops up on their feed and they said, we're praying for you. And I'm grateful for that. But another thing that I've learned, I just choose not to put my focus on the ones that chose to walk away. I don't put my focus and energy there. I put my focus and energy on the ones that have shown to be true colors, true friends, friend that sticks closer than a brother. And I could name them. And there are some that, they still pray for me to this day. Like my friend Chanta, who I told you was the one that escaped from Cambodia.
Yeah.
He's an angel. He's always been there for me and he's always prayed for me. And so I would say for, maybe people that are going through something, look for those kinds of people and keep them very close.
Have you discovered what what enables one person to be there for you when another person can't? Have you identified what those characteristics and behaviors are?
Yeah, sure. I think a lot of it has to do with, EQ, as we would say, like emotional intelligence and emotional availability. And I need to be realistic in understanding that we all have troubles, and I can't expect somebody else to just consistently put theirs aside in favor of mine. What's hard after a big tragedy, or a big difficult event like this is the gradual silence that happens. We have all the support and encouragement and love, and then it slowly fades away and real life comes back, right? And people have to move on. And I think in that transition is when some people can get hung up. But at the end of the day, we have to be the ones to decide, I'm not going to be a victim. I'm not going to stand here and be needy. I'm going to go and continue to plant seeds that I know will yield fruit in my life and other people's lives. And it's almost like, we weren't created, we weren't created in and of ourselves. The more we serve others, the more fulfilled and the more purpose and meaning we feel ourselves. And so my focus is going to be on other people, and it's not going to be on woe is me and nobody cares about me anymore and I'm just invisible, and I'm not going to do that. But I will tell you, Bob, like that long view of life, that was probably one of the most valuable lessons that I learned, because in 16, 17, and 18, which were I will say those were the hardest years of my life. 2012 was very hard, but there were a lot of highs, like I wrote a children's book and that got published, and we did the orphanage, and God was just like blessing our ministry like crazy. And but 16, 17, 18, when I had, young kids and I had to hit that reset button, my identity was in my ministry, my sense of worth, and I was in the wilderness, and God had to just let me wander like the children of Israel it felt like 40 years of me just, year after year after year, like, God, my savings are gone. Like, I don't feel like, all these churches cater to single moms, but none of them cater to single dads. And I go to church, and our church, I love our church, but I was invisible. Like, they give, $1 million a year to single moms, not the single dads, you know? And so I was stuck in this really difficult, weird place. And sticking it out, it inevitably led me to taking a role at a marketing company and then learning some skills in marketing. And then, all the way to where I am today, which was just this, this wild turnaround. So, all things in hindsight, God has a plan, and, ultimately, if you trust him with it and you're patient, um, it will come back, and it will be worth it.
Has it been worth it to this point in your life?
Yeah, 100%. Yeah, 100%. I'm grateful to be remarried, and now back in spring 2022 was when I met my wife Nadia, and um I just, yeah, it's totally worth it. What we have is special, and but probably the most valuable thing that I possess is just the experiences, the memories, and the person that it's made me to be.
What can you tell me one of your favorite memories? I know we all have a lot of favorite memories of our deceased, but
Yeah.
can you maybe share one or two of those favorite memories that when you think of them, it immediately comes? I love the name Aslan first. If people don't understand what Aslan represents or what the meaning or where that
Yeah.
came from, could you share that and then maybe share one or two stories about uh great takeaways from your daughter?
Oh yeah, for sure. Yeah, Aslan actually, it means dream or vision. It's a Celtic word, Celtic name. And it's a lot of ways you can kind of spin that and think about it, but when one dream dies, another one is reborn. Um, and your vision for your life might not be the same thing that God has for your life, and that's okay, because he's got something bigger and better. Um, but yeah, she man, her, naturally kids, right? Young kids, like her spunk for life was just it was electric. Like, I remember I look at pictures like this, and it's just so telling. Like, this is her,
Mm, mm,
that smile, like that way with which she just approached life was just so vibrant, and she was so expressive, like, and her face is like mine, her jaw structure, like everything. Out of my three kids, she's the one that I feel like most resembled me.
wow.
And she was my little buddy. Like, we were so close. She was my little dude. We loved, she loved animals like most young kids. And um we had this thing where we would chase lizards and just like catch lizards together, and we loved doing that. And I carried that forward into my other kids. And did that to them when they were young too. And um those are some of my fondest memories, is taking her to the zoo and looking at animals, and um just being goofy and silly, just being just stupid, goofy, and silly. We laughed so much.
Man,
Yeah.
you're
It was
shining.
hard when I slowly started to, forget what she sounded like. And, I remember, I'll never forget, like, I could feel her hand in mine.
Mm,
'Cause we used to hold hands all the time. I could feel her hand, and I could feel her hug. And I remember I was, just grieving, right? Grieving that loss of those memories. And I remember as it slowly started to fade away, and I started to think, like, what did she sound like again? You know?
mm.
And man, I'm grateful today, with technology. 2012, it wasn't what it is today, but now it's like we record everything.
Right, right.
Yeah.
Yeah, I tell you, yeah, it's the voice is the
Yeah.
lost, you have these memories and then there's these things that you go, I wish I remembered this, or I wish I knew this.
Yeah.
Um, um,
Yep.
with Aslan, if Aslan was privy to this conversation
Mm,
and we could bring her up on screen right now and she could tell us something, what do you
yeah.
think she would share?
Oh yeah. If she could tell us something, what would she share? Well, that kind of makes me think about something that I think you and I talked about in our last conversation. And I intentionally left it out of the story because I wanted to save it for a little bit later in this talk. But her last words were, we talked about this. Her last words were in the van, "Daddy, can I have some yogurt?" Those were her last words. She was hungry. We're foodies, so very, 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 very apropos, as we would say, as a Kretzman. She's thinking about food. But those were her last words, and you know, God
Is
just like
that a
gave
trigger for you when you hear when anyone brings up the word yogurt? Does that
no,
come back at all? No?
no, it may not in a negative way,
Okay.
not
Yeah.
in a negative way.
Yeah, not a negative.
No, no, I love yogurt. Um,
Yeah, it's more of an
yeah.
anchor than a trigger.
It is, yeah. If
Yeah.
anything, it's like little things like that, right? Like still create a connection.
Yeah.
One of the reasons why I exercise so much because of my dad. Like my dad taught me, and I love food and ice cream because of moments like this. But I remember God gave me this thought in 2012. I think shortly after, maybe days after the accident happened, it was this. I'm not living for her last words. I'm living for her first words. And you say, what would she say if she were here right now? I want to know. I'm intently focused on what she's going to say when I see her again. What are her first words going to be to me when I step foot into heaven?
What do you think they're going to be?
Yeah. Oh man, I think it's going to be honestly like, my mind sometimes thinks it's something like, "Oh, Dad, I'm so proud," like something like really deep, like, "Dad, I'm so proud of how you carried on." Honestly, it's probably going to be something really silly, like, "Dad, I've been dying for you to get here." No pun intended. "Dad, I've been dying for you to get here so I can show you these giraffes. You got to come and look at these giraffes," because she had this stuffed animal giraffe that she used to take around everywhere. And I'm of the belief that there's going to be animals in heaven. And I think it's going to be, even more amazing than it is right now. New Earth. We're not going to get into theology here, but I think it's going to be something like that. Like, "Dad, you got to try this ice cream," or you got to come and meet some of my friends. Like, I think that's going to be it because she's just everybody's little buddy, and
Mm.
she's so expressive. I think that's what it's going to be. Run, jump, and just tackle me with a hug, and something just fun and exciting news that she can't wait to share with me.
What was her favorite animal at the zoo?
Her favorite animal at the zoo. She loved you know, she loved cats. Oh, I think her favorite, yeah, I think it was cheetah. Her favorite animal was the cheetah. Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah, yeah. We love, the lions, the tigers, and the cheetahs, and we liked that one. That was my favorite as a kid too. So yeah.
I told you about my conversation with Garth, and when Garth asked me, "Do I have any other kids?" and I said yes, and he said, "Did they ever ask what happened to her, where she's at?"
Yeah.
And I was like, nobody's ever asked me that question. But I remember going, "What a great question to ask." And when I said, "Yeah, they do," his next question was even deeper. "What do you tell them?" I'm like, uh, does her sister ever ask about her?
Um, not a whole lot.
No?
No, and I'm gonna show you guys this picture. You'll like this one.
Yeah.
Yeah. Not, I mean, this was Maddie, back. This was like, right around that time. I mean, she was so little. It's funny though, like Aslan taught her how to walk. There are some like characteristics and features probably, and some personality traits that she has today. I'm
Mm.
very sure. I'm certain it was from her older sister.
Really?
Oh
Wow.
yeah. Oh yeah. Yeah. These girls, especially these two. Lucy's a little different, but these two, man, they were mischievous. They
Mm.
were like spunky. They were creative. They had a they kind of had like an edge to them a little bit.
Mm.
And yeah, they were a dynamic duo. They were fun. So
Wow.
Maddie doesn't, she doesn't remember this, but interesting detail. Uh, the Saturday before the Monday, which is when we drove and the accident happened, Saturday, I was cleaning the van and I took both car seats out of the van. That's just, I was practice for me. when I put the car seats back in, I put them in the opposite order. I wasn't thinking about it. And so Aslan was actually sitting where Maddie normally sits and Maddie where Aslan sits.
Oh,
Isn't that interesting? Like
yeah.
one little detail. And it
Indeed.
would have been, I'd have had a 16-year-old here today instead of a 13-year-old.
Man, oh man.
You know, and for
Hmm.
whatever reason. So I look at Maddie and she's both my kids are special, but you know, Maddie and I, we kind of endured something together when she was
Yeah.
very, very little. And I believe God has something special for both my kids, but
Amen.
maybe a little extra special for Maddie.
Yeah, definitely. I agree.
Yeah.
You know, one of the stories, my daughter, passed away, Macy. She was almost 3. She was a month shy of 3 when she passed. And she had a brother who's now, you know, I think about it now, he's 32. So he was, you know, about 5 years older than her. And he one day, she was bugging him, coming into his room. She was almost 3, coming into his room, and finally he's just like slams the door. And my rule is if you slam the door comes off. So he slammed the door. I walked up, I just popped the door off its hinges, set it aside. I said, now you don't have any door to keep her out. So she's welcome to come in anytime she wants. And I can't believe it, you know, and
Yeah.
she just stood at his door and did this. Neener, neener, neener.
Oh.
And to this day, if I hear anybody say neener, neener, I lose it because I'm just in hysterics thinking about she knew that she could get away with anything at that point.
Yeah.
And I think about that, and I think about some of the situations, you know, like you say, the pictures, the videos. I wish I had more video where I could hear her voice, all those things.
Yeah.
What do you do with this now, after these years?
Mm-hmm.
What do you do with it now to serve you versus it being taking something away from you?
Yeah. You know, I there's obviously you know, the way that I view the world and I, you know, I'll use that as a, you know, as kind of like an Ebenezer, as we would say, you know, in the Old Testament, like I'm going to put this flag in the ground as a marker that I can look back to in moments when it's hard again.
Yeah.
And so, you know, that I can point to that and say, I survived. You know, I survived. God was faithful. He got me through. It reminds me that, you know, today and going forward that I'll be okay no matter how difficult it gets. And so it's created a sense of calm when the storms are raging and the boat is rocking. I've got, you know, I've got some battle scars, so it affects how I view life. But then, you know, I'm grateful the legacy lives on in her name in continuing to help kids. 2015, what had happened was my, you know, our 87% of couples when they lose a child, like they end up in divorce, right? Just through how they deal with grief.
Yep.
And it, you know, 13, 14, 15 were hard years. But 2015, what happened was when God gave me the vision for the book and I wrote the children's book and I put it up on Kickstarter and we were raising money and churches were supporting. It's funny. My wife and I were looking at this the other day. The first moment and what caused me to connect with Andrew Smith, who I referred to, was through the book campaign. And his church, his youth group actually bought a bunch of books and contributed towards the project. Andrew Smith became, I was Moses, although he was older than me. I was Moses and he was Joshua. And he was the one that God was preparing for me to pass the ministry on down to. And man, I don't know how I would have felt if the, you know, like the ministry in the orphanage wouldn't have continued. That probably would have been really hard. You know, but the fact that it did and does, and it's not just getting by, like it's amazing the things that God's been able to do, you know, with Andrew kind of, you know, in leadership and leading it since then. It's incredibly special. So, you know, it serves me for that first way and then this way, knowing that there's a tangible, real impact that's still being felt because of her sacrifice that she unknowingly
Yeah.
made.
That's powerful.
Yeah.
Thank you for sharing that. We're gonna open it up, guys. If you're on Zoom and you want to be on camera, ask a question, make a comment. This is the time to do that. So Flo, I will start with you because I always know you have questions and make great comments. Everyone
bring
else can come on at one time.
if everybody wants to come on. Thank you for sharing, Matt. What I was trying to think, I mean, you overcame, and when you said God gives you, deeper wounds, that struck me. So I was like, wow, you really overcame a wound that was just, uh, wow.
Mm.
Thank you. Thank you for sharing. My question is, with the ministry still going, and I wrote that down as a question, but you had answered it. What do you think your daughter would say about keeping her spirit alive today? I mean, being 16, her, she still has that spirit of the orphanage named after her, and
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I initially what hits me right off the bat is shock and awe, like, wow,
Mhm.
that's that's amazing. Um, I'm sure there's a sense of, honor. Thank you for, for honoring my life, which is really what we want to do when there's someone that's deceased that's very special, is we want to honor their existence no matter how long or short it is.
Mm.
Um, and and that's, yeah, and her spirit, her life, and maybe we could say, like, her mission. We get the opportunity, to, in little and big ways, like, maybe like this, like I get to tell a story, and it brings purpose and meaning and fulfillment to it. And then, everybody kind of handles it differently, when the question, right, Bob, like, oh, how many kids do you have? Like, what do you want to say, right? That's always like, do I say 3? Do I say 2? And I try to be discerning over, have some sensitivity over what moments are appropriate for me to kind of get into it and say it.
Mm.
But the fact that I can have that, when I was young, I viewed my life, and I always said, I want to live my life in such a way that it leaves people without excuse.
Mhm.
I don't want anybody to have an excuse to why they can't do something, and I think through this, it provides a positive spin on you. What excuse could you possibly have? That could be worse than this. And there maybe are some, but ultimately, if you're looking for excuses, you're going to find it. But I wanted to live my life in a way that I would, uh, kind of be a springboard for people to say, well, if he can do it, then I can too,
I love that. Thank you.
Jim, how about you, sir?
Thank you for sharing, Matt. Wow. Inspiring. I'm grateful for the experience of listening and having and embracing your story. It's heartwarming and sad at the same time, but very inspiring. So thank you.
Oh, thank you, Jim. I appreciate it.
Dan, how about you?
Well, as you were sharing your story, and I, it was certainly touched me to my soul. This weekend, was my wife's birthday, and we had all 7 of our grandchildren here, and 6 of them range from 3 months to 7 years old. So we have all those young bodies running around and everything. And
Yeah.
it is an amazing time with each one of them, and all the things, and just thinking about all of a sudden not having one, it would, it just
Yeah.
it was hard for me just to hear about it. But
Mm.
I was saddened by the fact that your journey included having the people that you were ministering with turn their back on you. But that can be a real launching pad for you, because you don't need them, you need God.
Yeah.
And and when people don't see the vision and the future, God does. And you've got a long path ahead of you and a lot of things that you can do, and you don't have to have a title in front of you to do that.
Yeah, you're right.
So my prayers are with you, buddy, and I know you're going to go on and do many, many good things.
Thank you, Dan. Thank you. I appreciate that.
Thanks, Dan.
Yeah.
Matt, I just want you to know, like I said it before, but I just want you to know how much I appreciate you be willing to live out the story that has been written for you. You would have chosen to written, you would have definitely left that chapter out.
Yeah.
But you're living it, and the fact is that you're impacting people's lives, and mine. You've impacted mine, and so I know that I'm grateful to you
Mm.
for being that person, and I'm grateful to God for entrusting that story with somebody that He knew would do something with it.
Yeah.
So
Thank you.
I
Yeah.
appreciate
Thank you. Thank you, Bob. Thank you.
you, brother.
You too.
Guys, just know that when we do these stories, sometimes they're triumph and they're victorious and exciting, overcoming it, and then there's some where people are just really having to struggle through to get to that other side. And I always want the people listening, whether they're live or recorded, to take something away from it that they can use. And so if you do nothing else but look and say, what's something that Matt experienced that I can utilize in my own life now? I think you'll be light years ahead of the general population who never even takes into consideration the price that we pay to be who we are today, and the price that we pay to be where we are today. So I'm grateful for each one of you, whether you're watching live or recorded, whether you're watching on Facebook. I appreciate you. I'm grateful. As members, I want to give the members the opportunity to ask questions and make comments to the guests. And I just want you to know that I appreciate you guys all. Matt, I love you, brother, and please let's stay in touch. Let's figure out ways that we can play together. I know that God's using you in some huge ways, and I want to participate in ways that we can do that together.
Thank you. Love you too, my friend, and everybody else. Thank you for joining. This was an honor, and it brought me so much joy to tell the story again.
Thanks, guys. Thanks, guys. Get out there, make it a great month, and enjoy your next level.
See you next month.
We lost him. He's gone.